let's get started. We've talked about the rules, so I won't go into that again. Thank you, everybody, for being here today, candidates. It's a beautiful day, so appreciate you being here. We're going to start with 2-minute opening statements, and we will start with the incumbents. Martine, you're to my right, so let's start with you.
Oh, okay. Are we keeping them on the base?
It's up to you.
It won't come out of the thing, so sorry. I don't know if this is, people are going to see this part, but
it makes less noise anyway. So if you want to hold them, like I should have shut it off. Yeah, that's actually. You can just throw that.
Are we good to go? Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. My name is Martine Larocque Gulick. I am a state senator here in Vermont. I have served 2 terms in the Vermont Senate. I am vice chair of the Health and Welfare Committee, and I also serve on the Finance Committee. Before I was in the Senate, I was a high school teacher for 30 years, plus or minus a few, and taught mainly at Essex High School and Center for Technology Essex. I also taught at South Burlington High School, Woodstock High School in Grand Isle, and I taught overseas as well in the Czech Republic and Germany and France. I was on this Burlington School Board for 8 years. I just wrapped that up. One of the reasons is that I want to be a substitute teacher in the new high school. I'm so excited. I couldn't sub in the district when I was on the school board, but now I will be able to in the off session, which is very exciting. I ran 4 years ago because I wanted to not only just serve my community, but also really stand up and fight for children and families. We were coming off of COVID, and we had experienced a school closure in Burlington. Our students, after having been quarantined at home for 3 months in isolation, we had to go, our students had to again be put in a situation where they were isolated from their community because our high school shut down. I did not want to see that happen again anywhere in the state of Vermont. And because we have the second oldest school portfolio in the country, it's something that could happen. So I wanted to really dig into education reform, education policy, and that is what I've been doing. I have been on the forefront of not only saying no to the appointment of Secretary Saunders, but also saying no to Act 73, which I thought was a horrible bill, and this year really shepherding in H 955. Thank you.
Tanya.
I am also one of the 3 current senators representing the Chittenden-Central district. I served 1 term in the House and have served 2 terms in the Senate, and am running for a 3rd term. I grew up in a poor single-parent home. I'm a graduate of Essex High School. I got my master's degree in social work from UVM and my bachelor's from Northeastern. And despite my education, Vermont is unaffordable for me. As one of the very few renters in the State House, and currently the only renter in the Senate, I'm deeply aware of the growing challenge for working-class Vermonters to simply get by. But I want us all to be able to thrive, not simply fight for subsistence. I have a private social work practice here in Essex where I serve young people whose voices often are not well represented in the State House. I serve as vice chair of the Government Operations Committee, where I have worked hard to expand voting access, expand rural healthcare access through our licensing process, and I was able to finally bring to the finish line survivor benefits for a wider group of people. We also made political advertising more transparent, and next year I want to center my work in government operations on government accountability, transparency, and our ethical guidelines. In judiciary, where I also serve, I worked hard to get S209 passed, which expands the list of places where Vermonters will be protected from warrantless civil arrest. I also have worked on laws this year to strengthen and modernize our animal cruelty laws and modernize our laws against voyeurism and extortion. And in judiciary, I would really like to continue to expand protections for our immigrant neighbors, like prohibiting immigration data collection by the state, as well as unmasking law enforcement. I've also worked with Senator Gulick this year to get a statewide sanctuary schools policy passed to protect students and their learning environment. There's a lot more work to do. Policy often takes much more than 1 term, and I'm ready to get back to building on the work that I have laid in my time in the State House, and to make sure that every Vermonter's voice is represented, even Vermonters who can't afford a lobbyist, and Vermonters who generally don't see themselves in places of power. Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine.
My name is Elaine Haney, and I'm running for Vermont Senate to bring my 20-plus years of public service experience and my practical perspective to Montpelier. I've served as 12 years as an elected official in Essex Junction, and I've served on the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission and as the chair of Town Meeting Television and CCTV for many years. I'm a former small business owner. I've recruited and trained Democratic women candidates as the director of Emerge Vermont, and I'm an active member of our town and county Democratic committees as well as our state executive committee, and I represent Vermont at nationally at the DNC. And I'm ready to put all of that experience to work for you. I've been talking to a lot of Vermonters lately, and they're all saying the same thing. I love Vermont, but I'm not sure I can afford to stay here. And I have 3 priorities for making Vermont more affordable. First, we must get education reform right. The implementation of H 955 is only just beginning, and we must ensure that the needs of our students are the primary focus while we pursue cost savings. Second, we must fix healthcare so that Vermonters can actually afford to take care of themselves. I want us to explore universal primary care and including dental, vision, and hearing. And third, Vermont needs more housing. That means cutting red tape, supporting smart growth, and creating more housing options so Vermonters can live, build, and stay here. We must also do everything we can to protect Vermont from a corrupt, overreaching federal government. I'm running for our Senate to represent the Chittenden-Central District because our communities need a strong, experienced voice in Montpelier who understands what Vermonters are dealing with. I know we can achieve big goals together with teamwork, compromise, and hard work. It's time for leaders who are forward-thinking and brave. I'm asking you to cast one of your 3 votes for Vermont Senate for me on August 11th. Too many town meeting races.
I was just going to say, you can tell a local candidate when to think of town meeting day. Thank you. Nikhil.
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Nikhil Goyal. I'm running for Vermont State Senate in Chittenden-Central. Working people are being priced out of our state. We have the highest healthcare costs in the entire country, skyrocketing property taxes, and a lack of affordable housing. I believe that we need new leadership that is prepared to fight for working people, to deliver for working people, that is going to make sure that we have lower costs for working families, that we fight back against Trump's authoritarianism in Washington, and that we make Vermont a place where all people can afford to live here, thrive here, and retire with dignity. After graduating from Goddard College in Plainfield, Vermont, I went off to the University of Cambridge, where I did my master's and PhD in sociology of education, poverty, and incarceration. And I've spent my career serving the public good, whether it was marching for voting rights with Congressman John Lewis in Selma, Alabama, on the anniversary of Bloody Sunday, whether it was teaching students who are incarcerated sociology classes in a medium security prison in New York, or teaching students on campus at the University of Vermont, or whether it was working for Senator Bernie Sanders on education and childcare issues, I've been focused on making sure that we provide dignity and opportunity for those who have been denied it their entire lives. Now, we are facing some serious crises in our state, and I am prepared to put forward an agenda that is bold, that is ambitious, and that is going to meet the challenges that we are facing. I'm running on universal primary care to make sure that people have access to primary and preventative care, and they don't have to use the emergency room for basic care. I'm running to deliver a land bank that would rehabilitate dilapidated housing. I'm running to take on big tech and AI to ban social media for children under the age of 16. I'm running to protect public education and address cost drivers of rising property taxes. And I'm running to protect every member of our community. I'm proud to have been endorsed by the 2 unions, VSEA and the Committee of Interns and Residents at SEIU, and I humbly ask for your vote on August 11th. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question, Tanya, I'll start with you, and then we'll have you work your way to the right. Vermont is in a severe housing crisis. Tell us 1 or more actions you think the Senate should take to create more homes and make those homes affordable to most Vermonters.
Yes, absolutely. I think there are a lot of things we can do, some that have been difficult. I think we need to keep people who are housed, which means that we need to really revamp our landlord-tenant protections and make sure that those are fair. We also need to invest in fixing up housing that is subpar and not able to be lived in. And I also think we need to work towards social housing. In Vienna, Austria, there is a robust model of social housing, and housing there is affordable, it is safe, and it is fair. And there have been some municipalities in the United States that have started to look at this model. I introduced a bill last year that would have started moving us in that direction. And I think that that would allow us to really drive down costs by competing with, frankly, the private equity that is buying up our housing and driving up the cost. We also have the second highest rate of, or first or second highest rate of second home ownership. And so I think we also need to move forward without contingency, a higher tax rate on second homes so that we can invest that revenue potentially into building more housing.
So for me, the housing costs are increasing in ways that are completely unsustainable. So for me, the thing that I think we need to focus most on is increasing supply in a smart, community-supported way, and by making sure that we have sufficient housing across the spectrum of need. I want us to support and continue to sustain and increase programs that have already been passed recently by the legislature, like CHIP, the Community Infrastructure Program, which allows municipalities to invest in infrastructure like sewers and sidewalks so that developers don't have to do that, and that lowers the cost of housing overall. VHIP, Vermont Housing Improvement Program, gives small landlords grants and loan support to bring dilapidated apartments back online. And also the Homes Act, which provides a variety of new plan options that are pre-permitted so that towns can go right ahead and start building without having to go through extensive permitting processes. Continuing along with that theme, streamlining permitting and aligning local zoning for local housing, and making sure that we are investing in the shelter, safety, and dignity of all Vermonters at every stage of life, no matter what kind of housing they need.
Thank you for the question, Thomas. I've been talking in the myriad forums that we've been doing. I've been talking a lot about reacting to the federal government, but I'll also say that as a legislature, we're also reacting to policies coming from the governor or lack thereof. One of the issues with our current governor is that he doesn't seem to have a plan. So it is hard to consider and really think about investing in housing when the chances are at this stage pretty good that whatever we put through will be vetoed. This governor has more vetoes than any other governor that we've had. And it really does stymie the great work that the legislature puts forward. So I'll start by saying that. I believe that it takes more than just regulating land use to create a robust housing structure. We need to be focusing on building within our municipalities and within our towns so that folks have access to public transportation, so that they can walk to their local schools, so that they can access food and medical services without having to rely on a car. I wanted to point to one policy that I was part of this session in the Finance Committee. The 4 Democrats, led by Senator Hardy, we decided to put part of the buy down of property taxes into renter credits. They had not been updated for years, and we wanted to take $8 million of that buy down and put it toward renter credits. We ended up compromising with the other members of our committee. It ended up only being $4 million, but we felt very good about that. I think my time is up.
Thank you for the question. Housing underpins all the other challenges we face in our economy. We have nearly 11,000 abandoned, distressed, foreclosed properties all over Vermont. Their study found that a couple of years ago. And one of the proposals I'm running on is creating a statewide land bank. It's an issue that is being considered in a legislative working group. And what a land bank will do is acquire those properties at a lower rate, rehabilitate them, and turn them into permanently affordable housing for young people, for families, for older Vermonters who want to downsize, for unhoused folks. It's a much easier way to bring about more housing online at a lower cost, and that is accessible for Vermonters. And so that is, to me, like one very tangible thing we can do as a state to make sure that people can get access to affordable housing and achieve home ownership earlier than we have right now. And I like to make sure that this model builds in the community land trust so that there is the land trust owning the land, and then people can have equity in home ownership and get the benefits from that. I also believe we have to codify just cause eviction into law. Burlington, Winooski voters overwhelmingly voted for those ordinances, yet the governor continues to stop Burlington, Winooski from pushing those ordinances into implementation. And so we've got to make sure that renters are protected, they have rights, and that we are making sure that they are included in any conversation about housing policy.
Thank you, everyone. And for those who just entered, if you have questions that you'd like to ask, we have note cards up here for you to write your questions down. Elaine, I'll start this next question with you. Vermont's population is aging rapidly and not growing through new transplants, creating challenges for employers who need workers and Vermonters of working age who need to contribute more to fund public services. What would you do to reverse the slow population growth?
Again, housing is at the source of this really serious problem. Empty nesters whose kids have all left still live in large houses, and they can't sell them because there aren't small enough houses for them to relocate to, because there are still families in the small houses that can't leave. We are playing this game of domino where nobody can move. And so until housing is resolved, until we have enough housing for seniors to move to, whether it's apartments or small homes, until we have enough places for people to move around, that is going to be a problem, because people are not able to move to Vermont because they can't find housing. So that means a younger workforce isn't coming. It means that folks are not able to make it work here so that they can stay and with their parents and take care of them here in Vermont. So I think the housing situation is truly difficult and is not one that is going to, until we solve that, we're not going to see the increases in population that we need. We're supposed to get to 802,000 people in order to make our economy sound, and I don't see that happening without strong strides ahead in housing.
I completely agree that we need more housing. That will take time, and that will take investment that needs to come from, again, the governor, the legislature, and Vermonters, frankly. In the meantime, if we do what the governor wants us to do, and we do these massive forced mergers across the state and close potentially hundreds of rural schools, who is going to want to come here to live? If we don't buoy our public education system and make it strong and make it accessible to young families, we are literally going to be exacerbating the problem. So that is critically important. Eye on the prize, eye on public education, that is key. We also have to have robust policies that favor families and young children. We passed some great legislation last session around childcare, and it has paid dividends. We have over 1,000 new childcare positions open in the state. I talked to the families that live in my part of the New North End in Burlington, and they love what we did, and they find it to be very helpful. We need to do more of that. So investing in social programs is what will bring young families in and what will keep them ultimately.
Thank you for the question. Let's begin by recognizing what are the building blocks of a decent life. And let's start to create a government that is trying to deliver those programs and services. And so that means from cradle to grave. It starts with early childhood education investments, full day preschool, and affordable universal childcare for all families. It means that we have paid family and medical leave, that we invest in affordable housing at every sector and tier of life. And it means universal primary care so that nobody goes without basic health care and have to use the emergency room for those critical situations. A lot of that is going to cost a lot of money. We have to move towards a system of fair taxation. As I know, the two incumbents have been pushing for in the legislature, we can claw back some of the funding, some of the tax cuts that were given to the ultra wealthy as part of Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, and make sure that we fund things like universal primary care, things like affordable housing, and other critical investments. These are, when we think about the demographic challenges, this is not our destiny, but it requires political will to change the course that we're on at the moment. So that's what I'll be focused on if I'm elected, to make this a place where all people can afford to live here.
Thank you. Yes. As one of the young people who nearly left Vermont because it's unaffordable to live here, I really understand this challenge. What I did instead was run for office to try and do the things that would make it easier for me to live here and afford to be here. And all of the things that have been named, making sure that we have affordable housing, making sure that we have universal childcare and public pre-K, making sure our public schools are strong, and strengthening our career technical education programs, as well as paid family medical leave, are important things. We also need to protect our immigrant neighbors. Part of what can grow our population is making sure that we have our immigrant neighbors here and protected. And some of the things we've already done that we can build on is expanding licensure and professional jobs and making it easier for people who may not have been trained in the United States to do the jobs that they were trained to do here. We did that this year with medical licensure. We did it a few years ago with the licenses regulated by OPR. And I think next we need to do it with teachers' licenses. And so I think there are a lot of things that we can do to grow our population, to diversify our population, and have a vibrant and beautiful Vermont. I love it here, and I absolutely understand how difficult it is to make ends meet.
Thank you very much. As Mayor of Winooski, I hear from our immigrant neighbors all the time. I spoke to a gentleman recently who is a doctor, or was a doctor, in his country of origin, and now he cleans floors at UVM. So really important work that I know that the Senate and the House have been working on. As we talk about healthcare, let's move into our next question. Martine, I'll start with you here. Vermont's healthcare premiums are the highest in the country. On the other hand, our hospitals are struggling to stay solvent. What would you do to make care more affordable?
Great question. We talk about flying a plane while trying to fix it in the healthcare committee, in the health and welfare committee all the time. We had a great bill that we passed out of the Senate. It was S-190, and it would take our reference-based pricing plan and it would have sped it up a year so that Vermonters could have potentially saved $40 to $80 million. Sadly, it was vetoed by the governor. So again, we can pass really great policy in the Senate, but if it's vetoed and if we don't have the numbers to override the veto, sadly, we are stuck with the status quo. That said, one of the things we can do, because emergency room visits are extremely expensive, and frankly, hospitals in general provide expensive care, is to move some of the services provided in hospitals out of hospitals and putting them in the community. Community-based healthcare is much less expensive than hospital care. And I've been the sponsor of bills like opening the first birthing center in the state of Vermont. I've been in the forefront of getting Medicaid to pay for community-based doulas. These are investments that we make up front, and they save money in the long run. So a lot of small policy decisions can be made, and then we can also make these larger structural changes, like using reference-based pricing to tie costs to Medicare.
Thank you for the question. We pay the highest healthcare costs in the entire country, believe it or not. It's absolutely remarkable. Vermonters on average pay about a fifth of their income just on healthcare, and that's just totally unacceptable, and we can change that. I'm running on universal publicly financed primary care. What that would do is essentially cut out the insurance middleman, and the state would pay providers directly to make sure that those essential services are covered. And that would, over time, save us money. It would improve health outcomes. It would help us reduce the burden on our school budgets in terms of healthcare spending. And that should be coupled with some major reforms to healthcare pricing. Reference-based pricing is not a silver bullet, but it's an essential first step As Senator Gulick mentioned, the governor vetoed a fast tracking of reference-based pricing for school employees and other state workers, that actually will increase our property taxes. So we have to make sure reference-based pricing is enacted. We have to hold hospitals accountable so that they don't price gouge patients. We have situations where patients are paying thousands of dollars more for MRIs and colonoscopies at the UVM Medical Center than other hospitals. That's got to change. We've got to hold those hospitals executives accountable and make sure that the workers, the people who deliver care, the nurses, the doctors, the cleaners, the other medical staff have decent wages and health care and are taken care of.
Thank you. The long-term solution is universal health care. It is truly the only thing that is going to bring us health care that is affordable, and every other developed nation in the world has done this. In the interim, though, there is harm reduction that can and is being done. Reference-based pricing is one example. We also worked to lower the cost of certain expensive infusion drugs in the last biennium. There was a bill that I think is critically important, disallowing medical debt from credit reporting, and actually the treasurer is using money to buy medical debt to basically pay low-income Vermonters medical debt. Medical debt should not exist, but given that it does, people should be able to get a home if they get cancer. We also need to lower our administrative costs. One bill that I've introduced that I'm hoping will get more airtime next year is actually disallowing from hospital executives and administrators to be paid more than 10 times what frontline clinical staff are being paid. The UVM Medical Center has more than double the number of administrative to clinical staff than other rural hospitals its size, and they are very highly paid. That bill also would have made them get in line with the national averages and ratios. And yet their Medicare rates are lower because of the outcomes at the University Medical Center, because we don't have safe staffing. Rural healthcare is expensive, and we do have an older population, but we also have a very healthy population. So we can, through some of these administrative changes and some of the changes to how we pay and what we pay, lower costs as we work towards universal healthcare, which is the ultimate solution.
We want to do everything we can to have more choice for patients, less wait time for patients, and less cost for patients, and to keep Vermonters healthy. You know, Vermont hospitals at UVM Medical Center have the highest administrative costs than most other hospitals in other states of same size hospitals. And the Green Mountain Care Board has asked them to reduce their overhead by $300 million over the next several years. And so that is just a small piece of what UVM Medical Center can do to reduce cost at the hospital. And on top of that, increased competition for medical services elsewhere. There are lots of patients who go to the open MRI place on Williston Road, Green Mountain Surgical Center in Colchester. We need more choices, more competition for medical services so that we don't have to wait 6 months for an appointment or drive all the way to Dartmouth to get an appointment. And the last thing I'll mention, because we all mentioned a ton of interesting things that we need to do, are the new prescription card, I think it's called Array, that will allow Vermonters to have reduced prescription costs, which was brought forth by the Treasurer's Office. So I think we are on the right track, but there is so much more we need to do. And I think we all have really strong ideas on how to get there.
Thank you, everyone. Nikhil, I'll have you start this time. Describe your reaction to the education bill passed this year. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And what role will the legislature play in education in the future?
Thank you for the question. So the bill that the legislature recently passed is a massive improvement from what was enacted a year ago. We are moving in the direction of voluntary district mergers, which I think is a much better approach than essentially forcing a one-size-fits-all approach on our schools. And so I think there's going to be now a ongoing process for communities to begin to figure out how we can move forward on that approach. The second area that's really great is these cooperative service zones so that districts can share services such as transportation, technology, special education, and other critical infrastructure. And so I think that is going to help us save millions of dollars in the long haul. The area where I'm deeply concerned about is the foundation formula. There's a lot of unanswered questions, what that amount is going to be, how it's going to affect our district. One of the big challenges and actually problems with the former bill of last year is that it was found, if it had been implemented, would have been found to lead to a major reduction, millions upon millions of dollars from the Burlington, Wyhovsky, and Essex schools. And so I want to make sure that we protect public dollars in our public schools, that we fund our schools equitably, and that we deal with some of the major cost drivers of school spending, and that is primarily healthcare. So all of the above is, I think, really necessary at this time.
So I think that the good aspects of 955 really came from the good work that Senator Gulick did on the redistricting task force, and a lot of that work was included in 955, including the cooperative education, the CSAs, that's what I know them as. It also includes a second homes tax that is unfortunately contingent on the foundation formula going into effect, which I don't love because I have really deep concerns with the foundation formula. I have worked in both our higher resource schools and our lower resource schools, and I have yet to work in a school that has more than it needs. And the promise that a foundation formula is going to drive down costs simply means that we're going to underfund our schools. There's not a state in the country that uses a foundation formula that does not systematically underfund its schools. Some of them are so bad that they have been taken to the Supreme Court. And so I have deep concerns with the foundation formula. However, there are contingencies in this bill that may require legislative action to answer some of the questions and concerns that we continue to have. I also have concern with the timeline. I don't think that the timeline that was ultimately passed out of the General Assembly is even possible for our schools. And so it's going to take a lot of support as we continue to build this craft. I'm not sure if it's a plane or if it's a boat yet. And so it's not building a plane while flying it. We're building something while doing something because we don't actually know what it is. And I think that's a really dangerous way to make policy, especially education policy, because our public education system is the backbone of our community, the foundation of our democracy. And to be so irresponsibly moving forward is deeply concerning to me.
I think we all have a long list of what we don't like about this bill. Something I'm concerned about with H955 is that we're told that it's voluntary mergers, but my understanding is also that over a certain period of time, if mergers don't happen, they will be required. And I just don't feel like that's actually a voluntary merger. That's more like you can have your way for now, but you're going to have to do this thing you don't want to do. Second of all, I'm concerned about what people are calling orphan schools, the schools that are not necessarily going to be able to attach themselves and merge with other school districts. How are they going to fare? How are they going to be funded? Some things I like about the bill, taxing second homes, unfortunately tied to the foundation formula, but perhaps we will still see some really badly needed revenue from that. The reappraisal system that is coming in with this is going to require municipalities to group together and do their reappraisals on a schedule. So we won't have towns who are going 10, 12, 15 years without being reappraised and then having a really shocking tax bill after they reappraise. And so it'll also make it easier for towns to find companies to do the reappraisal because there are very few of those in the state. And I'm really happy that there is going to be a start at the state helping school districts with school construction costs finally. There was a moratorium in 2008. We should have never stopped planning for that. So this brings it back.
Last summer, I was appointed to the school redistricting committee, and then I was unanimously voted as co-chair of the committee. So I feel very gratified to see a lot of our hard work enveloped in H955. But I will say, I still have deep concerns about our system in the state of Vermont. We still have a very Byzantine system. We have non-operating districts. We have school districts that do not have schools. We have a lot of choice. We have a tuitioning system that is incredibly inequitable. And it is a concern because if you look across the country, you can see in almost every state across the country, our public education system is under threat. There are people who do not like public institutions, they do not like public systems, and they want to privatize education. That keeps me up at night because we know what happens when we privatize education. There are students and there are families who are left out, and their needs are not met. So these are things that plague me. I think about them a lot. But I also want to point to leadership in the legislature. For the last 4 years, the Senate has been led by committee chairs who are tied to private schools. Burton Academy, that is a private school that accepts public education. How can we get ahead of our issues when we don't have public school advocates leading these committees? This is deeply unsettling. We also need to stop acquiescing to the desires of the government. He put a Secretary of Education in place who really does not understand public education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tanya, I'll have you start this next question. Vermont received property tax buy-downs in each of the last 2 years, potentially creating the conditions for a fiscal cliff. What should lawmakers do to alleviate property tax concerns, but also keep the government solvent?
Absolutely. I have deep concerns with the way that the property tax buy-downs were done, and actually in every year that they were done, I introduced amendments to try and do it differently. This year, for example, we bought down the property, we spent over $100 million buying the property tax rate down to 3.3% for everyone. That includes people who are currently paying a fraction of a percentage of their income. In fact, when I put forward a bill that would have used just $17 million to buy property tax rates down to 0 for an expanded group of income sensitized households, it occurred to me that if it costs $17 million to buy that rate down to 0, that means we're spending over $83 million buying down taxes for people who currently don't need that buy down, who are paying fractions of percentages, while our bottom 2/3 of earners pay 4, 5, 6% of their income. Unfortunately, while I did have support, and I thank my district mate for supporting me with that, we were not able to get that through. And I have thus voted no, because I think it is an irresponsible use of $100 million to buy down property taxes for people who are getting, on average, a $57,000 tax break from the federal government. We should be moving towards fairer taxes, not more state money going into the hands of the wealthiest Vermonters. Furthermore, if we moved to a income-based system of funding our education system where we asked everyone to pay their fair share, we would bring more money into the system and be able to alleviate the burden on our lower and moderate income Vermonters.
Because we have spent the last 3 years buying down the tax rate, those chickens are going to come home to roost. And, as a city councilor and as a town select board member, in both cases in our communities, we do not buy down taxes because it'll just make our residents have to pay more in taxes in the following year. And it's sort of like just sort of kicking the can down the road on that cost. It's really bad financial practice. So because those 3 years have happened, we are going to have to figure out how to pay all that deferred tax in the next coming years. And so how will we do that? Will we stagger it and do a slight increase every year until we make ourselves whole again? Do we find yet another one-time resource which shouldn't be used for buying down taxes? The governor has put us in an extremely untenable position, and the legislature is going to end up having to figure out how to stagger that cost increase because it is absolutely coming. And one way we can continue to work on reducing property tax increases is to focus even more on healthcare premium reductions, because the cost of healthcare is what is driving school budgets and municipal budgets the most, and we need to continue focusing on that. And finally, we need to shift towards an income-based education funding system, because fully 50% of our property taxpayers are already income sensitized. So we should move in that direction because it's more fair and less confusing.
Buy downs are poor tax. It's a bad practice. When the 8 years I spent on the Burlington School Board, we never used our reserves to buy down tax rates, even when we were building a new high school and we all saw our property taxes shoot up because of that school construction. It's and that's a sentiment that I've shared in the Finance Committee. So I'm not quiet about that. A lot of my colleagues will tell you that if we just slash taxes, everything's gonna be fixed. And I have to remind them that there is simply no evidence that trickle-down economics work. And I've talked to social studies teachers and economics teachers, like, please show me an example of trickle-down ever working, and they can't because it's a myth, it doesn't work. So again, it would be great to have a plan, a long-term plan coming from the Office of the Governor. Right now, we don't have one, so we're, again, reacting to the policies that he puts forth. But I'll talk a little bit about another piece of tax policy and education policy as well that I find problematic. And on the face, it seems like a positive thing, which is the capping of spending in certain districts. A lot of people are telling me, oh, they're glad that there's this cap, but the bottom line is that school districts have costs that really vary from year to year. And so sometimes when we're putting a cap on one district, and when they have, an unforeseen event, they are really going to have to make deep cuts in programming and likely also staffing. So I want to keep coming back to having a systemic and structural plan and structural change to our system to ultimately bring down taxes and to do it in a way that won't harm people.
Over the past 10 years, Governor Scott has kicked the can down the road on so many issues, and now we are feeling the brunt of that failed leadership. And we see that on the issue of property taxes. The single biggest driver of cost is healthcare. The fact is we've spent almost all of our time over the past several sessions almost exclusively on education, on school consolidation. There's been almost next to nothing on the issue of healthcare, apart from reference-based pricing. I think that's a real missed opportunity when we could have actually begun to figure out how do we move towards a community-based, publicly funded and subsidized healthcare system where we have community nurses and community doctors and make sure everybody has access to primary and preventative care. We did not do that. And so now we are going to deal with we're suffering through the consequences of all that. I think apart from healthcare, just to reiterate, housing is absolutely necessary. If we're going to grow the economy, if we're going to grow the pie, we need to build more housing. We need to rehabilitate housing into permanently affordable housing so that's easier for people to stay in Vermont, to grow up here, and to retire here. So I think there's a series of tough decisions we're going to have to make, and that means that we got to reject all of these property tax buy downs, which do nothing to actually address the core root causes of the economic problems that we face.
Thank you all so very much. We're now going to move on to questions from the audience. And audience, just for your understanding, due to the forum aspect of this, any of the questions that you gave me that are for individual members who are running, I'll ask you to address those with them, may it be later today or through email or whenever it is. Elaine, I'll have you start. What's the best path forward for dealing with the South Burlington Correctional Center's inhumane conditions?
So the state of Vermont came to the town of Essex looking for approval to build a women's prison in Essex Town. And I think the design review board in Essex Town rightly rejected the application. It wasn't the right fit, and there were reasons that they made that. In addition, the plans for that facility were lopsided heavily towards incarceration and not enough towards recovery and treatment. I would love to see the state of Vermont put forth a plan for a reasonable facility that focuses more on rehabilitation and treatment and also has wraparound services that provide the folks who are incarcerated with training and support and treatment so that when they also leave incarceration, they are being cared for. They are not walking right back into the situation they just left or worse. Part of the situation is also communities. No community wants a prison. And so it is incumbent on the Department of Corrections and the state of Vermont to come up with a plan for a facility and a treatment plan that residents can get behind and want to support their fellow Vermonters who are needing to be incarcerated.
The The women's prison in South Burlington is a cruel and old and really harmful place, and I feel for the women who are there. Many of them have substance use disorder, and many of them are awaiting trial. So they're being held in these very inhumane conditions, and really, they have not committed violent crimes. We can look at other countries and see what works. And there are many Scandinavian countries and countries in Europe that have a very different approach to incarceration. And it's focused on rehabilitation. It's focused on providing services and care to those folks so that they can re-enter society and be part of a community. That should be our ultimate goal, and that's what we should be working toward on a regular basis. So I have followed the prison saga. We wanted to build it based on a model that is in Maine. But I have to be honest that I held a lot of misgivings about the proposal. One, just because I don't know if we have the resources to do what we would need to do to get to a structure similar to Maine's, but also, I'll repeat it, I'm just not sure that leadership is prepared to do something as innovative as a treatment-based, I don't want to use the word prison, but center that could care for folks while also rehabilitating them for society.
Thank you for the very important question. We have a system of mass incarceration in this country that taxes all of us. It taxes us morally, economically, socially, and the women's facility is certainly part of that structural problem. The first and foremost thing is to recognize that many of those women do not need to be in that facility in the first place. They do not pose a threat, an ongoing threat to public safety. And many of the women who may have committed, say, a more violent offense, they may have been victims or of violence in their own lives, or they were responding to partner violence or intimate violence in their crimes. And so that means thinking about resentencing some of those individuals. It means thinking about where we might have another type of facility that is not a carceral facility, but one where there could be areas for rehabilitation and treatment. The point of prison should be rehabilitation, not warehousing. We have a distorted logic in this country where if you commit violence, we then inflict violence upon you and make you a more violent person than when you came into that facility in the first place. I really appreciate Senator Gulick mentioning the Scandinavian countries. They have a much better system of criminal justice. They treat incarcerate people like human beings, and we in Vermont can move in that direction by making sure that we have facilities and a criminal justice system that is about addressing root causes of crime and treating people like human beings and helping them become productive members of society.
Having visited some prisons in Norway and Finland, I've seen firsthand what humane treatment can look like. And Norway and Finland are some of the safest countries in the world, and yet they incarcerate a fraction of the percentage of their population that we do. If incarcerating more people was going to keep us safe, we'd be the safest country in the world, and we are not. In fact, we're in the bottom third by the Universal Peace Index. If we eliminated cash bail, we could move the remaining 40% of the incarcerated women that would still be in that facility to another existing facility tomorrow. Not 10 years from now when the facility that was proposed would be built. Further, if we stopped incarcerating nonviolent offenders and instead invested in treatment, community care, and education, we would spend far less, be safer, and do more good for people. Our numbers are again ticking up because of policy changes that have been made in Montpelier, largely driven by a loud narrative about lawlessness over the past few years, when simply that isn't true. Burlington is the third safest city in the country. And that is not because we're locking more people up. It is because we are making investments in connecting people to services. We need to invest in housing and education and keep people out of the carceral system. Once someone enters the carceral system, they are far more likely to recidivate with a higher level crime because the system is not working. So not only do we need to change the laws about who we are putting behind bars, but we also need to look at what we are doing to make sure that we are investing in a system of rehabilitation and humanity.
Thank you all. Next question from the public. Martine, I'll have you start. Vermont's housing crisis comes down to supply. We don't have enough units, and unmet demands increase costs for everyone. Meanwhile, rising education and healthcare costs are driving up property taxes on our neighbors. What specific steps would you take in your first 100 days in session to increase housing construction without adding to Vermont's tax burden?
Well, I've had a first 100 days, so I can speak to that. It really, I don't want to condescend, but I'll educate folks a little bit in that you're.
Yeah, and I don't want to take that from your time, Martine.
Right.
So I will say, the first 100 days in the legislature is very different than like a president's first 100
Right,
days, for
right.
example.
Yeah.
And I'll also
Yeah.
add that this year there's going to be a large number of new members coming in to the State House. So there will likely be a very slower first 100 days than you may experience otherwise. With those caveats, Martine, please.
Yeah, and I was going to talk a little bit about the committee process. I mean, it really depends on the committee that you're on. If I were sitting on the housing committee, I would have more say on what bills were taken off the wall and what votes I got to cast on those bills, and I'd be able to sort of move that process along. But given my committee assignment, at least thus far, on finance and health and welfare, I probably wouldn't really be able to affect too much change. That said, I could certainly introduce bills, and I have introduced bills across almost all of the committees. So that is definitely something that I could do. I think for housing, it comes down to investment. So the bill that I would put in to encourage housing would be a bill that focuses on an appropriation of some kind to invest in housing. I know we've talked a lot about land use and government regulation as an option, but and I talked earlier, I still believe that really supporting our rural parts of the state, but supporting them by really encouraging growth in town centers, I think is where it's at. I think that is where we need to go as a state, and I think that would be the most helpful to folks who, again, might have mobility issues or don't own a car. And that is the best way also to hold on to our local schools, is by having vibrant towns.
We've talked a lot about housing. Just to reiterate, I strongly support enacting a statewide land bank that would rehabilitate dilapidated foreclosed units of housing and turning them into permanently affordable housing. I also strongly support creating more dense neighborhoods that are walkable, that you can rely on public transit to get around. Those are the types of investments that can really address several issues at the same time. And I know Burlington has made some real progress over the past several years to dramatically increase their housing stock. And I think that's going to pay dividends in the long haul by making sure that we actually increase our population in some of those areas and reduce the burden on our property taxes overall, as you have more taxpayers in those neighborhoods. So definitely be focused on housing as a public good, and it'll be one of my top priorities.
So yes, we have talked about housing a lot, and all of the things I have previously mentioned looking into social housing and tenant protections are important. I also think that it is important to recognize that private equity is buying homes, and that is driving up the cost. And once they can get that for it, they're not going to just decide to get less without pushing other levers. We also have issues with landlord monopolies where one or two people own most of the housing stock, which drives up the cost. I do want to point to some of the successes we have had. Burlington is a perfect example. So 6 years ago, Chittenden County as a whole had a vacancy rate of less than 1%. And through some of the work that we have done, that is now pushing 4%. A healthy vacancy rate is 6 to 8%. So we're not quite there yet, but some of the work we have done is working. And we need to continue to do that while continuing to really push on driving down cost with housing as a public good. And I think social housing, as I said before, is one way to do that, to compete with and set lower costs against private equity and landowner monopolies.
For me, the answer to this question would be to ask whatever committee I happen to be on and whatever legislation I happen to be looking at the time, how will this impact housing? if I'm on the Environment and Natural Services Committee, if I'm on the Healthcare Committee, if I'm on Finance or Economic Development, how will housing be a part of this bill? Is it represented enough? Is it going to do damage? Is it going to help? The other thing I think it was important for a legislator to do, regardless of what time of session it is to reach outside the State House and make sure that I am hearing from all of the towns in the district, like, what do you need? What is the housing situation? What is going on right now that I need to know that I might not know because I'm holed up in this committee room for hours at a time? Talking with organizations like VHFA, Champlain Housing Trust, Evernorth, those folks who are on the ground, the frontline people who are creating housing and helping people who are in that housing survive. So I would want to make sure that I have strong relationships with all of those organizations, that I have their data, that I understand what they're trying to do, and then how would all of the work we're doing in the State House impact the overall picture of housing in Vermont.
Thank you very much. Looking at the time, I've got to move on to your closing statements, but I'll read you this question, and if you can try to incorporate it in your closing statements. You all seem to agree on just about everything. How should a voter decide who to vote for? And we'll start with our incumbents. So we'll do Tanya, Martine, then Elaine, and Nikhil.
Wonderful, thank you. I want to thank the Chittenden County Dems for organizing and hosting us today, and for all of you who came on this one of what seems to be few beautiful days this summer. I want to start by saying that this biennium was really hard. It was filled with fear, uncertainty, crisis after crisis, many of which have been growing for decades and won't be solved overnight or with just tweaks around the edges. And through it, I worked really closely with Senator Gulick to fight for all people in our district. And we were able to get important things passed to protect people, to lower costs, to improve outcomes. And I think we've showed ourselves to be a really effective team. There is a lot more work to do. And to Thomas's point, there is a lot of turnover. And I think the foundation that we have laid together and track record of really being fighters is important to continue to have there as we see so many new faces coming in. Yes, we absolutely need to think about how we compromise, and we need to think about how we work together. Those are really important things, and things I think Senator Gulick and I have shown that we're quite good at. However, with a federal government acting with lawlessness and dangerousness, we do have to always draw the line at compromising with people's lives. I'm ready to go back and continue building on the good work that we have done, continue fixing the mediocre work that has been done, and frankly, repealing some of the damaging things that we have seen. I think it is critically important that we think boldly, that we think transformatively, and that we, in the interim, while we build towards these transformative systems, that we think about harm reduction. We think about preventing the bleeding that's happening right now. One example of that, as I said earlier in healthcare, is we need universal healthcare, but we're not there yet. And so getting through legislation that helped people with medical debt is important harm reduction. And that's how I think about all of the work that I do. Transformative conversations we have to have, tweaks that start to get us, structural changes that start to get us there, and harm reduction that helps people who are suffering right now. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Thomas. Yes, thank you everyone for being here on this beautiful day, and those who might watch this online. I've been in the Senate for 4 years, as I said, few weeks ago, I believe now, one of the forums that we were at. The proof is in the pudding. Look at my voting record. Look at the work I have done. I have fought from day one for families, for children, for consumers in the state of Vermont. I've worked on some wonderful bills that have been passed, like the paraquat bill. We are going to be the first country in the nation to ban the toxic herbicide paraquat, which is directly linked to Parkinson's disease. We will be joining 74 countries across the globe as we do that. I was so proud to work with Senator Vyhovsky on S227, which will protect our children in schools from illegal ICE raids, and will also protect their data from a federal government that's been a bad actor more and more frequently. S243, which is a bill that will support the Vermont Language Justice Project, so that all of our new American communities will have access to videos that are in multiple language so that they can respond to public health emergencies. And then H955, again, I had a big hand in education reform thus far, and I want to continue to do that work. I want to make sure that as we are reforming our education system and trying hard to bring down property taxes, we don't harm families, we don't harm children, and we keep our communities, including our rural communities, whole. That was one of the things that I said to my colleagues, is that you need to focus on this bill because this will have a huge impact on rural Vermont. We can't turn our backs on those communities. So I hope you will cast a vote for me. I would love to stay in Montpelier and keep up the good fight, even when it means not always agreeing with everyone, even when it means not supporting the appointment of the current Secretary of Education, even when it means not voting for bills that I find to be hurtful or detrimental to our system.
So I'm running for the Vermont Senate because I believe that Vermont can be more affordable and that our government should work for the people and not the other way around. Vermonters deserve strong leaders who aren't afraid to solve our toughest challenges on housing, healthcare, public education, and property taxes. I'm not running on promises. I'm running on 20+ years of public service. I've built my career around listening, problem solving, and achieving community-oriented results for my neighbors. The work ahead is difficult, but I know we can do it together. Breaking the housing bottleneck, committing to an education system that works for all Vermonters, reduce the cost of health care, protect Vermont from federal overreach and chaos, foster thriving economies and support small businesses, and prioritize the needs of children and families. We can do all these things, but it will take strong, experienced, committed leadership. From helping neighbors solve everyday problems to guiding major community change, my work has always been rooted in collaboration, pragmatism, and deep connection to the people I serve. In my work, I've built relationships with local leaders, community organizations, and Democrats from local, state, and national committees. And it's those relationships and the effort I invest in them that gets results. I'm endorsed by multiple elected leaders across the district, legislators, and neighbors because I have earned their trust and confidence, and now I am asking for yours. I'm committed to finding realistic solutions to the challenges facing Vermont today, and I'm ready to serve in the Senate. My name is Elaine Haney, and I am running for the Vermont Senate and ask you to use one of your 3 votes for me on August 11th. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. My name is Nikhil Goyal, and I'm running for Vermont State Senate in Chittenden-Central. And I'm running because working people are being priced out of our state. And I believe we need new leadership that is going to fight for working people, to lower costs, and to make sure that we make this a place where all people can afford to live, thrive, and retire with dignity. I've spent my career fighting for children and families. I will come into Montpelier with a clear set of ideas and objectives and a vision to make life better for ordinary people in our state. As any senator can attest, you have no staff going into this building. You have to have expertise, you have to have curiosity, and you have to have the willingness to work with others on serious problems. And that's the type of record that I bring into this position. I'm running on a very bold, ambitious agenda that will make life more affordable. I'm running on universal primary care to make sure that people have access to primary and preventative care. I'm running to deliver a statewide land bank that would rehabilitate dilapidated housing and turn them into permanently affordable housing. I'm running to protect public dollars in public schools and address the major cost drivers of rising property taxes. I'm running to take on big tech and AI. I have put forward a very aggressive plan to take on the power of these tech oligarchs by banning social media for children under the age of 16, by taxing the profits of big tech so that we can fund local journalism, and making sure that we put strong regulations on AI data centers so that our energy bills don't go through the roof and our environment does not suffer. And finally, I'm running to protect every member of our community, to unmask ICE agents, to prevent any collaboration with ICE among our state and local police. I'm proud to have been endorsed by Ben & Jerry's, Bill McKibben, a whole host of state legislators, and the two unions that have endorsed in this race, VSEA and the Committee of Interns and Residents. I humbly ask for your vote on August 11th. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much to all of you for joining us tonight for this forum. Thank you to the Chittenden Dems for putting it on. And remember to make a plan to vote. Thank you.